Hello there. So, uh, following some feedback from users on issues that didn't quite work as intended, I thought I'd use a bit of free time I had today as an opportunity to look at one specific block of functionality and try and A, remind myself how it works, and B, see if I can spot anything that suggests where things may be going wrong. I think what I've realised is the systems that I've got in place are reasonably fragile in that they do all work, but if you stray from a particular set of operating parameters, they tend to not work as well. For example, I have a system where if you fly near to a pilot, they'll try and board, so you can rescue them and take them back to base. But turns out that also attracts ambient helicopters who try and land automatically to extract the pilot, which is nice of them, of course, but it's not quite what I had in mind. So, anyway, I wanted to go through the specific functionality of dropping supplies off, food supplies, at villages in the AO, because if you can do that, you are rewarded with intelligence on minefields. So this is a sort of a hearts and minds type thing. So I'm going to start from the very beginning and try and trace my way through when certain things happen and how things are alerted and see if I can spot what's gone wrong, because I had a report that although things were being dropped off correctly, nothing was being triggered. So I just wanted to make sure that I haven't missed anything. So I'm going to start with the patrol mission init function, which runs at the beginning after you sort of instruct for the mission to be started, and it sets off on the server side a few downstream functions and declares some global variables, which I'll kind of glance over because I'm looking specifically for the hearts and minds stuff. But just very quickly, while we're here, might as well just have a quick look. So the first thing I've started to do now is to remind myself when I last updated things, because sometimes I look at something and think, did I do this? Is this recent or is this months ago? I'm not tracking what I've done necessarily, but I'm just keeping a very quick track on when I updated it. So as I stage things ready for deployment to GitHub, I've just got a quick one line up here just to remind myself when I did it. And I know it's all in Git anyway, but this kind of is a bit easier at a glance. Anyway, these two I think are a legacy system that I used to use that enabled either a Blue 4 run system or an Inti 4 run system. And I think I need to kind of update this because all of this here relates to what I'm trying to do there, which is to give the choice of whether the AI units should be controlled by the player or by by an Init 4 player or a Blue 4 player. And I think generally speaking, I've moved away from the dual faction across players idea because it was a bit too isolating, I thought. So that still works, and basically I just check here, are any players independent? If so, put something in there, and if there is something in there, then that is a thing and that is true, otherwise that's true. So I could probably just get rid of all that and just have that there, but I'm not going to make changes now. I want to if I'm going to change this, I want to make sure I do it properly, because there'll be other things that fall into that category of change. So I'm trying to be more organised in what I change as well, rather than just seeing things and jumping on them. Trying to be a bit more structured. This badly named global variable is just something I use to see if a mission is live or not. This is something that I use to ensure that voice alerts don't overlap each other. So if I have a voice alert that's saying something, that will be true, and then if another voice alert is triggered, it will first see if that's true, and if it's true, it'll wait and come back, and if it's not true, then it'll go for it. So that's a basic way, just to make sure that you don't get sounds overlapping, because obviously that sounds awful. And that is linked to that, but I can't remember exactly how. But anyway, we can glance over that. This, I can't remember what that does. Probably nothing, so I'm just going to leave it for now. This is tracking how many points the patrol has taken, and I'm not sure why I send it as a public variable. I may not need to do that, actually thinking about it, but it's there and it works, and at some point I'll go through all of those public variables and get rid of any that I don't need. Flyby is active, helps to ensure orderly spawning of ambient aircraft. Can glance over that. Field bases array, that's a legacy thing. Respawn store. We used to have a system where you would respawn at the last taken patrol point. That's what that was used for. But for at least the last year, we've run a helicopter-based respawn system where everyone just respawns back at base, and you just need to get a pilot to bring you in, which generally works okay, but I acknowledge that there are some issues there, possibly with people waiting around, but you can never get it 100% right, I guess. Disposable VIX. Okay, so this helps me to manage vehicles that I leave in at base, where people can quickly get around, and once they leave the vehicle, if they move away a certain distance, they'll just disappear. So it's a bit of a hacky kind of system just to help people move around. Spec Ops Attack, that is linked to the HK teams that I trigger. Mission status, another public variable. Setting up initial patrol. I'll have to come back to that. I can't remember. Okay. Now we have markers. So I have a function that does specific markers for things. Then I spawn op4 HK, and I wait 900 seconds in this initial triggering, just so it doesn't kind of kick off straight away. The lerp score checker, that is something that just runs in the background and checks to see how many of these lerp missions we've done. They're like sort of in-field resupply missions. Small groups checker is something that I'm currently working on, which is to periodically look for small groups of units, 1 or 2, maybe 3, and if they find any, look for other similar sized groups and bring them together, just to sort of avoid lots and lots of small groups running around cluttering up the map. Okay, then we start the mission, which is an execvm script which I need to fix because I'm trying to move away from all that. That's very legacy. It works, but yes, need to fix that. Then we have some text that tells people that the mission is live. and then a debug just to inform me when I'm testing what the trigger is. So, following the path, Killchain mission start. So this is, like I say, this is legacy. I need to extract this out into a function. So you have some voices telling you stuff. Ammo 1 is a fixed asset in the base, which I use as an initial start position. Kind of useful for initial sort of markers and so on. So I've got some faded in markers for the base. I take the first objective from this global array, which contains all of the patrol points of that particular route. Then I'm still checking for this legacy system of whether or not it's an Init player running the AI. So it's not, it's this. That can go pretty much. So this is the next thing that gets run. So we're back into function land. So we're back into patrol initial procs check. Initial procs check. So this function will monitor player proximity to patrol start point. So yeah, it's basically a stager. So it kind of stages things to before it starts spawning everything in. And thinking about it, maybe I should spawn things in before they get there. I think what used to happen is the mission would start, and then there'd still be lots of faffing around, and then by the time you got to the LZ, the welcoming party was already there. So what this did was, I think, encourage people to get on the ground and then start patrolling. So this kind of introduces a bit of a delay to when things are spawned and moved in. So we get the objective position. That's passed to this. Then the LZ is this global array, the first one in that array, and then we get the position of that LZ. Then we get all of the west players, put them in here, and then we run a cycle check. So while that's true, you're checking, or you're making this check. So for each blue 4 player, you get the position, you get the distance from the LZ pos, which is the position of the initial LZ. And then if it's under 150, then is near is true. So I think this could be an exit with, because I think this probably is inefficient. If there were lots of players, it would do this a lot of times. Not a big deal, but yeah, I think I need to change that to exit with. So the first player that it finds, that's good enough, effectively. And then if it's near, and actually you could exit with this, thinking about it, but you know, this is the way my brain works. So you do a check on all the players, and then if any of them are within 150, that is true. And then you get to this bit. So yeah, it is very inefficient, but only happens once, so it's not that too bad. So if that's true, then you get an alert. Everyone gets that. That should be all players, but again, good enough. And then we hit patrol main cycle, and we send to that the LZ pos, which is where we've landed or near landing, and the objective position, and then we kill the check. that we're doing here, and then we're checking every 10 seconds. So this is like a staging loop. So once the mission starts, this is running, and whenever any player is 150 near, then we effectively kick off the main cycle. And this horrendously long function is the evolution of 2 to 3 years of faffing around. But effectively, this is the bare bones scaffolding of the entire mission. This runs every time that there is a live kind of cycle event, and a cycle event is attacking a point and then defending a point and then checking stuff at the end of that and then moving on, and then the whole thing kind of repeats again. So there's quite a lot in here which I won't go through in detail, but while I'm here I may as well just kind of skim through it. So these are the things that we sent to it. This is legacy, pilot mission. So I mentioned that earlier. If that's true, then we run the extract pilot function, which is something I'll look at another time. I think there are issues with that as well. I think things are not despawning properly, so I'll come back to that. But that's basically just triggered once per patrol cycle. And then we do another side mission, resupply lerps. Then we chuck down some ambient mortars, which I quite like. I know it divides the crowd, but it just gives a feeling of sort of near danger. They don't usually kill people, but sometimes they do. So it's not a perfect system, and I kind of like that. Then you have roamers, these kind of random patrols that kind of operate independently of any other activity. So yes, it potentially is a frame drain. Could be virtualized, but I think once you're in the AO, I really don't want to have things appear in front of you, even if it might be 300 or 400 meters away. But if you see that, it's just like, oh yeah, it's a game, and I like to try and forget I'm in a game sometimes. So these patrols are spawned into the AO, and don't always interact with the players, but they are always there. So it's like an additional threat surface, if you like. Then I create some patrol markers, which is a separate function, which I'll jump into real quick. Sorry, this one. All this does is it takes the positions of the objective and the start point, makes a nice big red circle and a smaller red circle in the core, and then an icon to attack, and then it draws a line between the 2 points. That's all that does. So this all used to happen in this script. So I am in the process of kind of breaking things out into smaller sub-functions. So yeah, it's just an ongoing thing when you've got a big old legacy code base, I suppose. It's almost a never-ending task, but I'll get there. Next, I create patrol camp items, like towers, cages, tents, all that sort of stuff. Kind of typical VC stuff you might see, or MVA stuff. Issues with that, I think some of the towers are being spawned in on non-flat land, which looks shit. So that in itself is another sort of small piece of work to kind of explore how that could be a bit nicer and a bit more kind of realistic and less gamey. And to be honest, you could spend like a good 8 to 12 hours just sort of exploring ideas, testing, Before you got something that was kind of 90% to 95% always good, and I can't quite justify that spend at the moment. So that is what it is for now. Then we send in a welcoming party to the landing zone. So that's kind of your initial kind of contact, and the time it takes to break contact with this group depends on how far away the landing zone is from the objective point. So over time, I've kind of worked out if I want something that kind of happens real quick, then I'll make sure the LZ is quite close to the objective. And if I want something a little bit more kind of gradually moved up, maybe some quiet time in between, I'll make them about sort of a kilometre to 1200 away. So that's something that works okay. There's no issues with that really. Then I spawn defenders, and then I spawn statics and mortars, and then I spawn a trap field, which is in summary, it is a virtualized area that is only triggered when players are near, not when Indy 4 are near, I should say. So some work is needed maybe to look at if that is the best way to do things, but I think it works okay. It's a newer feature, so it hasn't really been battle tested more than twice actually. So yeah, probably has some issues. Generate hearts and minds location. So this is what I'm interested in. So I take the number of points taken, which in the beginning would be 0, and I take the objective position, so the target we're moving towards, and I take the number of points that we've taken, and I send that to the spawn village HM. So let's just pause this for a second here and let's have a look at what this is. And I wish there was a way that you could just open this like a link. I don't think it's that. So spawn, so it's a spawn function, spawn village HM. Hearts and Minds village function. This function generates a village location used for the Hearts and Minds element of Killchain. It finds a random location in the AO and makes it a supply area for the mission. Supplies dropped here will yield intel on traps and minefields. Then I tell myself I'm now linking one HM mission to each point, and I'm sending the number of points taken as a param, as by doing this I can include a simple check for each function loop spawned by each patrol main cycle. This way I can essentially close down any HM mission and thereby also close down any procs checks. So yeah, I think what I was trying to do here is, let's say there's a 4-point patrol, and throughout that we've got 4 villages that are waiting for supplies, and then you've got 4 proximity checks happening, and maybe nobody ever goes near them. Then you've got 4 parallel checking functions running, which probably is okay, but I would prefer it didn't happen. So that's what I'm trying to do here, is restrict the amount of ambient village things are happening at any one time. So we've sent the anchor and the number of points, and then get random pods in the AO red zone. So I get a random direction, random distance, and a random position based on the anchor of DST DIR. Then I get the nearest named village, call that the nearest ville, and then I get the position of the nearest ville. So this basically finds me a village relatively close to the target objective. Then I create a marker for it, and then I give it a little box icon, and I make it green. And then I call the ambient villages. So this is like the sort of the setup, if you like. It's really just creating a marker, but passing on to the ambient villages function the position of the village and again through that the number of points. And I can't remember why I'm doing that, but hopefully there is a good reason. So we're going to jump over to ambient villages. Okay, this function creates village ambience, spawning and despawning villages in a designated zone. Works similar to the wander zone system in the Pathfinder base. Checks for cargo boxes, and if it finds one, then trust points are given. I don't think I built the trust point system. Don't forget EH on villagers, because if they get killed, that's bad. Add more vills. So yeah, maybe expand this. The reason I didn't do that is because I wasn't sure it was working correctly. So once I'm sure this is working as intended and is robust, then I can kind of open it out to a wider area. So then you can get more of that kind of open world feel rather than the kind of rail track mission flow, which is ultimately what I want out of this. So it should be given a position and create a marker from that. So we need a system to find vill locations. Okay, so these are our params. Then we've got a local array to hold ambient units, which we use for counting and deleting. Just some classes for the ambient. We create a patch, just a dirt patch, on the anchor point, the position of the village that we've chosen to help pilots. It doesn't stand out, but it is, if you're looking, you can see it. It gives you a bit of an extra kind of hint. There's not much else. There's no smoke or flares to tell you that you're in the right place apart from a map marker. So that's my sort of compromise there. And then we are doing quite a lengthy check. Gosh, every 40 seconds we're doing all of that. So let's break this down and see where I'm going wrong. So while we are checking, and this has all happened tracing the flow back, we've started the mission, we've landed at the LZ, we have now then triggered the mission proper, and every time we are moving through that cycle, we'll get one of these. So definitely I want to make sure that this isn't running more than once, because that's a lot to be happening simultaneously 2, 3, 4 times. So if the points that we sent don't equal patrol points taken, then we exit out of this scope completely. So I think what I'm doing here is, this is the first thing it will check. I might need to come back to this, but I think what I'm trying to do is to make sure that if this is running, that's fine, but if another point runs and that changes, then the next time this first cycle runs, it'll realize that the points don't match the actual points taken. So at the beginning that will be 0, and then once you've taken, so right, rewind. First point, land on the deck, you haven't taken any points left, so patrol points taken is 0, and that was also 0 because that's what we sent in to this function. So while this function is running, that's 0, that's 0, so that doesn't run. Cool. First point is taken, you're moving on to the second point, that gets updated to 1, and so the next time this whole function runs, that will be 0, that will be 1, that won't equal, that will match, so we will break out to here. I think that stops this from running. So I think that was my system for avoiding doubles or triples. But I can't recall if that definitely works. That's my working theory. Anyway, then we check for players that are near. So for all players, we get the position and then the distance from the square dirt patch, and if it's under 350 then we push that player back into count data, and then we count data, and if it's over 1 then we have action. Otherwise do nothing, just a debug. So while this is running every 40 seconds, this is the thing that happens most of the time. Assuming no players are within proximity, that is the tax of this function. It's checking against all players, and maybe there's 20, not a massive amount. This all happens within like half a second, I guess, less. So it's not a huge glitch, but maybe there's a way to make it better. But anyway, if that has something in it, then we've got this. Then we trigger. So we have at least one player near. So we delete the marker, and I think I do that just in case there is an older one around. I can't remember that. There's a just in case, may not be needed, but it's there anyway. Then I'll create a marker, 100 by 100 circle over the anchor, invisible, and then I use that as a way to make the units I create walk around randomly every cycle, trying to give the impression of activity. So I'll create 10 units somewhere within this zone. They're Zeusable, and they go into this local array, so I can delete them if I need to easily. Then after that's triggered, then I run a cycle check, which is this, and that's cycle check under the player near local. Checks against all players whether any of them are within 350 meters. So although we know that there are, we always want to keep checking, because if they're not, then we can despawn everything. So that's why I do this again. So this kind of happens on a loop, but once you have a player near, this won't run, but this will run. And yeah, you could kind of dispatch that off into its own function that returns true or false. Yeah, I might do that at some stage, but yeah, lazy coding. So yeah, we're in this player near check loop, and we're checking, are there players near? Because if there are, then that's one thing, and if there aren't, then that's a 0, because we're counting that. And if there are 0, then no players near, loop ends here. Then we can delete the villagers, which is delete all of those. And then we also delete, then when no players are near, and we've deleted all the villagers, we then find all the objects. So we get the anchor point, and we find near objects within 200 meters, which is the kind of the zone of forgiveness for the food boxes. And then we count the objects, and then I'm just debugging that here. Maybe I don't even need that. Probably I don't. But the objects is definitely something that I do need, because for each object that I find, I want to check to see whether any of them are this food box. Now maybe that's where I'm going wrong, because it wasn't a sack, it was a box. So I'll come back to that. But anyway, that's the class name that I'm looking for.
So for every object that we find within a 200-meter radius, after all players have left, after being there to trigger it, and really what I'm looking for here is a pilot. So what could happen? So there are two things that could happen. The player team could wander through the village, and if they detect that players are near, it will spawn units, make them move around, and once it detects that all players are gone, it'll say, okay, do we have a food box? And that's where this will run. Now, if it's just players walking through, the answer will be no. But if it was a pilot that had triggered proximity and they had left a food box and then they had gone, then we'll find that through this system. So for all of the objects, which we're running a check on here, if the type of the object, and there might be a few, which is why I don't go too hard on it, if and probably there's only going to be one, but if there are more than one, then we'll exit with just the one. If any of those are the box, then we'll delete that box. We'll debug a message to say we've got food. Then we will tell people, but only these people. So I'm using player roles here. So for all the players, you just check if their role is any one of these things. Then, and I could switch it, but this works as well. Then I put these roles, these players, if any of these players are present, they go into this tell, and then I telex tell. I'll use this telex system that I've got to tell just those players, pilots, and platoon command that that we're good, that we've got food delivered successfully. And then I spawn the information VC intel function. Then I delete the vil marker, and then the check is false. The overall check is false. So a successful mission should completely end this entire loop. Yeah. But if the count is more than one, then players are still there. So a player triggered it, and then for every other count it does, if a player is still there, player is near, move around, random position, around the Vil wander zone, careless or safe for all of the ambient units. So that's the sort of my attempt to sort of making things look busy. So all good so far, I think. So now next breadcrumb in the magical mystery tour is the information function for VC Intel, which is information VC Intel. This is triggered on successful delivery of food to a village. It will show location of traps as a marker icon and a marker zone. Some ideas, some checks, some info, debug. So I'll wait 60 seconds after the pilot has delivered the food. And then I tell command and pilots 60 seconds later. Now that could vary. I think I did more than that randomized, but it's still in test, so 60 seconds is fine. I'll send them a telex to say you've got intelligence on a minefield near your current objective. Combat documents have been updated, which is basically your map. And then I get all map markers, and then for each of them, if there is a marker called trap field, then debug. We have trap intel. Then I create a marker called warning traps, and I set that to the symbol. And then, right, so the trap field marker already exists, but it's invisible. And all we're doing here is making it visible and red. And we're putting in the middle of that a skull and crossbones marker. Which is that. So what could be going wrong? Because another thing that occurs to me is if you have, say, a 4-point patrol route and you trigger each trap zone, so the traps are spawned, that's a lot of items to have on the map, which probably won't have any impact on the mission. So it's probably worth maybe exploring whether you could have some kind of a despawning, permanent despawning system for trap zones and traps that have been triggered. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. So, okay, so this is the flow for hearts and minds and traps and trap intel. But what I don't think I've shown here is the spawning of the traps. So if we go back to the main cycle, that is where we spawn the traps, right? So spawn trap field. Okay, this function generates random trap fields around objectives. It's designed to work the hearts and minds system, where delivers food and avoidance of killing. Civvies will generate intel on minefield locations. So this is run on every mission cycle. These are the two types we're interested in at the moment. And we get a minefield position, which is that far away, any direction from the central position. So it might be right in the way of the patrol route, it might be completely off the beaten track. Then we create a marker called trap field, which we looked at just now. For some reason it's blue, I think that was a debug thing. It's 150 circle and it's invisible. Then we have a proximity trigger. So while we're checking, if we get any player closer than 200 meters, then the check releases itself. So there's potentially an issue already. So this is running for every patrol point that you are trying to undertake. And if you have 3 points and 3 of these running, it's possible that this cycle could be running continuously in parallel 3 times. There's no way to check, like we do with the hearts and minds, where we check patrol points taken. This will just run. So that's definitely something I need to fix, is to sort of turn this off, possibly. So if it's the first objective that we're trying to take and we don't trigger a trap zone, then once we start moving on to the second trap zone, we could probably close this loop down. But I'm not sure how to do that in a good way yet. But that's an action. But nevertheless, that's what we've got at the moment. It's running every minute. It's checking whether any player is within 200 meters of the minefield. And if it is, then it does this, triggers the spawning. So we've got a local array to store the traps. We choose a random trap type. We get a random position in the minefield marker. We create the vehicle. And then we create the mine. So this is what I'm not sure about. Because when I was testing, if I create mine, it didn't trigger. So the way I got around it was to create a vehicle and then create a mine at the same place. And it does seem to work. It does. They do their job, if you know what I mean. But I don't know if this is the best way to create them. But I Zeus them. Well, they're Zeusable, and then I push them back into the trap array, and then I make sure that Op will know about them, because it would be annoying if they all just kill themselves on their own traps. And that is it. So there's definitely something we can do to improve this. So first of all, we need to shut this down. I think if we progress to another part of the mission and that's still running, that should be shut down. And I think there is a global variable that I use as part of the mission flow. So as long as I can make sure that that is kind of picked up within this 60-second loop, so from completing one point to moving on to the next, usually at least a minute, I think. So I think if I have that in here somewhere, let's just make a note of that. Okay, so that's an action. Then we want to think about how to despawn these as well. Again, based on this. So maybe it's a bit clunky, but you could put a 5-minute timer on it and then just shut it down, despawn everything completely. That will keep it clean. It may possibly interfere with things, or you could add maybe a wider player procs check maybe. But there's an action there. Okay. So that in a nutshell, in all of its different threads, that is how the Hearts and Minds system works. And I've already, through doing this, figured out a couple of things I could do better. But it still isn't telling me why. I got a report on the weekend just gone that somebody had done the mission but didn't get the action and didn't see the marker. So hopefully TacView will kind of show what went down there, but I can't see anything at this point that is showing me what isn't working. But obviously that doesn't mean that there's nothing amiss here. So yeah, as soon as I make any progress with this end-to-end system, I'll come back to this and just do a full update. So if there is anyone out there who wants to run a similar kind of system, here is kind of like the basics of how you would do it. And if I can learn what's not working well with it, or if I can improve it, then I will document that through this process as well, just in case it's of any use to anyone. I mean, obviously with Reforger out now and Arma 4 nearing sort of medium distance away, it's kind of put a bit of a weird kind of downer on SQF for me. I mean, it must have at least a year left to run, probably more. But it has split my attention, so I'm trying to sort of understand. I'm at sort of level 0 really, but I've got this new Reforger thing to try and get my head around, which is just completely, utterly different from this. Everything, all my sort of mental processes that I've built up for coding missions in SQF just don't apply anymore. So I'm trying to sort of split my attention between trying to understand the future, but also because this is the present and this is a live thing, I want this to be as good as it can be. So I'm still trying to build this as well as I can, but it is kind of, yeah, we're at a kind of an end of life stage here. Just like, we've been in a nice warm bath for a long time, but now we can feel the water's getting a bit cold, but it's not cold enough to get out yet. Weird analogy to end this on. So anyway, if you made it this far, thanks for listening. I hope it was useful. And yeah, any comments, just chuck them down below. Cheers, guys.